afternoon. I'm Tommy Wolf, and I'm your coordinator for today's presentation. And before we get started, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, if you'll turn your phones off or fix them so they won't make any noises. And we're glad that you were able to come. And today's presentation is Issue 34, the Platform Economy, and our speaker is Joe Gentry. And I've not heard you speak before, but I've heard wonderful things about you, so I'm looking forward to your presentation. Joe is a former adjunct economics instructor for ACC. He's retired from First Federal and currently serves as a trustee for Alpena Community College. Please join me in welcoming Joe.
Thank you, Tommy. When I was teaching econ, as an economist, there's something that is an overriding principle and value that kind of drove me in all my analysis of everything, and it's called cost benefit. And the government actually, in doing their funding, has actually adopted cost funding to a lot of rulemaking. That the marginal revenues got to exceed or equal the marginal cost, which means the benefit we get from every extra dollar has to be greater than the extra cost of employing that dollar. So that's kind of the way I analyze things and the way I move about and what interests me and what I look at, particularly what's going on. And many people probably don't know, well, what is the platform economy? It's been called many things. It's been called the creative economy, and it's been called the sharing economy. Those are the real positive people that are supportive of it. And then the negative people and the detractors call it the gig economy, or the precariat, or the 1099 economy, which speaks to how people are getting compensated. Not by W-2s, but by 1099s, because you're not an employee anymore. You're just a provider, a service provider. You're a contractor. I'd like to use the term which I think most economists today have done. They call it the digital platform economy. So, little history. Up to the 1900s, we were an agricultural economy. Simply 90% of the income in our society up to about 1900 was created by agriculture. And we're an agricultural-based society. Along came the Industrial Revolution, reorganized society. Now corporations became the tenet of our organization, of our economic activity. Corporations. Still prevalent today. The corporate entity still is the dominant feature in our economy. We are moving to what is called the platform economy. And what is the platform economy? It's two things. It's algorithmic and it's cloud. And many of you today, when I started out with computers, technology, they were very expensive. You know, Besser Company had a whole room full of computers to just process their industrial activity that was going on. Cooled room. I mean, you know, I listen a lot to Sirius Radio, the 40s channel, and they have a great commercial. They laugh about, you know, we still do things by Morse code. We have a computer, but we pay a 14-year-old kid to update our Facebook page. You know, the computer's in a warehouse somewhere. It's huge. Well, that's the way computing was. It's not so anymore. When I left the bank, we had just gone to cloud computing, which made our technology, our access to technology, so much more sophisticated, so much better, so much more secure. We didn't have rooms full of computer material. We went to cloud-based computing. And so what is cloud-based computing? It is the platform. It is the platform. It's people that provide you access to what you couldn't afford to purchase on your own. So today, individuals have access to stuff that would have prevented them from entering into markets because of cost prohibitive to buy all this huge computing software, the hardware necessary to keep up with those that have access. So we've created a totally new kind of environment in our economic world. Where it's going to go, who knows? How will it transform our economic system? That nobody knows for sure yet. It's all choose to. So let me talk a little bit about what it is. Y'all familiar with algorithms? An algorithm is nothing more than a formula that's like a decision tree. Okay, if A, then B, then you go, you've seen those inside of a magazine cover. Let's determine, I'm a runner, okay? So you'd say, what kind of runner are you? Do you like trails? Do you like roads? So you go down here, I like trails. Do you run in hilly, rocky, sandy? And each one leads you down to a choice that you make. It takes me to the kind of shoe I should be purchasing based on this formulatic tree, decision tree that you walk down. So software engineers write these decision tree formulas that allow for solutions, and it's called an algorithm. Okay? And so that algorithm gets wrapped into everything you do. Back in the 70s, and it's all based on raw data. Okay? You have to accumulate all this raw data. And all this raw data, then you write a formula and an algorithm that allows certain decisions to be the outcome of those algorithms. For instance, Walmart back in the 70s had more raw data than the United States government. Period. Walmart started collecting data on every shopper. What was in their cart, where that cart traveled in the store, all this stuff. And they could tell based on all the pieces of product that was in that cart that went through the checkout line. They knew that the number one item purchased was bananas. Okay? So they knew what to place by bananas based on all of the algorithmic raw material that they put together. Okay? So that allowed Walmart to be very efficient in the placement of the products in their store. Also on how to treat shoppers. Okay? So you collect all this raw data, then you write software to make it usable and understandable. Usable to make you more efficient. Okay? So that's what's happening today. That's what's happening today. All of you that have smartphones, you know that they're listening on the smartphones. Because you can mention something and the next day you get an email about a product that you mentioned on your smartphone. Somebody wrote the software, all these algorithms to say, okay, John said Bayview Hotel. The next day he gets an advertisement from Travelocity.com listing the Bayview Hotel. Okay? That's where we're heading. That's the platform economy. That's kind of the outcome of the platform economy. So they have all this raw data, all this algorithm. What have people done with it? It is literally changing our economic system. Example, back in 1967, the first Super Bowl, tickets were priced between $6 and $12. Okay, which would have been today's prices, maybe $45 to $90 a ticket. If you didn't get a ticket, how would you get a ticket? They had so many tickets. How would you get a ticket? You'd have to make some connections, make some phone calls, and hopefully you'd find somebody that would be willing to sell you their ticket that they already was purchased. Today, Super Bowl tickets run from about $850 to $1,800. Those are the cheap seats. Okay? You can go online through StubHub and get tickets. if you're willing to pay the price. And people have paid up to $25,000 to get a ticket on StubHub to go to the Super Bowl. So what is StubHub? Right? It's an online reseller. It's just an online reseller. And think about it, they weren't the first in the market. Ticketmaster was. But StubHub has 55% of the market. Ticketmaster has about 12% of the market. So in economic terms, you have an oligopoly situation where two major suppliers control the resale of tickets. So how does that happen? It happens because of the platform economy. Now we have all this raw data, all this technology in the cloud that allows, and today you can go to certain ticket providers and they'll tell you, where do you want to sit? This is where I want to sit. How many tickets are available? Okay. And price based on where I want to sit. So the platform economy has created these intermediaries that use raw data and they connect buyers with sellers. Okay. They connect buyers with sellers. Now the people that initially distributed the tickets, we don't make any more money. The financial intermediary does. Okay. So that's just one simple example of a platform. So who else and what else that are platform? Facebook, MySpace, Friendster, Jenga, Classmates. These are all platform providers. And these platform providers are taking, such in the instance of Facebook, they're monetizing my personal relationships. Facebook created this platform that has, I can't even remember how many users anymore, close to hundreds of millions of users on Facebook. And what it does is it allows Facebook to monetize my personal relationships because advertisers want access to my personal relationship. Okay? So that's a huge platform. All of these other ones, Friendster and MySpace, all those, they are trying to monetize personal relationships. In the professional world, when I was working, LinkedIn was a big platform that I used. What did they do? They monetize my professional relationships. Okay? So LinkedIn, and they have sets of advertisers and service providers that want access to my professional relationships. Now, there's a downside to all. As nice as also, there is some downsides, and these are the questions we're going to get to. We also have Twitter, Snapchat, and Pinterest. All of them taking little pieces of what I'm interested in and who I'm interested in, and these platforms allow me to use their platform, some free, some not. I mean, Facebook's free, Twitter's not. So they have subscribers, but they also have advertisers and that want access to me as a user. We have online auctions. eBay, Overstock.com. Okay? They're competing with retailers. What are they doing? Those online auction firms are, again, putting buyers and sellers together. They have online dating. Whether it's Elite Singles or Christians Mingle or eHarmony or Match.com or Zeus. Just think of all of the separate dating providers. Those are platforms that are trying to link people together. Okay? They also have advertisers and service providers that want to have access to my personal relationship needs. There's also my favorite, Farmers Only. So if you live in a rural area and you only want to be connected with people who are rural, like farming, you can go to farmersonly.com. One of the big ones that is changing, Uber and Lyft. Okay. Uber started in 2010. They got $20 billion in venture capital. Today they have a market value of almost $100 billion. Not a bad investment from that venture capital firm. They have 40 million people using their services. They don't own any cars, and they don't have any employees who are drivers. Okay. Is that going to change our economic relationship? It can, and it could. But that is what a platform provider creates, this what we call platform economy. Now, Uber, because they've been so successful, they have competition in Lyft, who just went public, and it was the biggest public offering ever. They don't own any automobiles. They don't own any cars. So they don't have huge capital investments, and they don't have any driver employees. They have people that have unused asset or their automobile, and they like to use it and maybe get reimbursed. The other big one is, I know I've not used the service, but I know an awful lot of people that do. My kids use it all the time. Airbnb. Okay? Airbnb. It's just a platform that has put people that have space in their residence, and they like to monetize that space and connect people, and they compete with hotels and motels and the other service industries by doing that. So we're seeing this revolution in a platform economy. I mean, I could go on and name, in the music industry, completely changed with Pandora, Spotify, iTunes. You know, I still have a phonograph at home, and I love LPs. I also have a Bose CD player because it's a little bit more convenient. But when I go over to my daughter's house for dinner or whatever, they just put on their playlist from Spotify. They don't have any records. They have a much bigger library of music and access to music than I do. They don't have cable TV because they use Netflix, which is, again, a platform provider. They connect buyers and sellers through this platform that is available through the internet. And so the work industry, I don't know if any of you are familiar with TaskRabbit or Handy, Amazon services, home services. I want a plumber, I want something done around my house, I can go to TaskRabbit, and it will connect me with a provider of the services, and rated too by TaskRabbit. So I know that I'm getting somebody responsible and knows what they're doing. The big ones now are, and I watched it last night on Business Tonight, challenge banks. Okay. Totally online. They don't have any bank branch operations anywhere. They start up and they're just an online banking service. You see credit cards moving to that. No brick and mortar anywhere. It's just online. And they're online to do transactions. They're going online to do lendings because people like Kickstarter and Indigo, AngelList and Rate Seller, all these platforms in the financial markets are connecting buyers and sellers. You want to crowdsource something, you don't have to go to a bank. You got a great idea, you go to AngelList. There's venture capitalists waiting to give you money for your idea. So you could, in a sense, our economy, the delivery of goods and services, and these intermediaries, by the use of the platforms, are connecting buyers and sellers. And there are consequences, and there are truly benefits to this. Okay? Now, the platform economy, the foundation is these algorithms that are the fabric of the internet, and particularly through cloud computing. It wouldn't be possible if everybody that had a network today had their own huge storage of hardware to make the software work. Now there's a few large cloud networks that allow access to entrepreneurs that find a niche of putting buyers and sellers together and can do it over the internet without having to invest in huge amounts of capital to make that happen. Okay? Today there's open source software. The college is looking at open source textbooks. Think of the difference that makes for a student who one of the biggest expenses outside of tuition is our textbooks. You know, it's not uncommon for a typical student taking 12 credits to have a $600-700 textbook bill. But if you now have open source textbooks and you subscribe to it as an institution, your students have access to the textbooks via the platform. They don't have to have the hard copy book. They don't have to worry about getting ripped off when they go to resell it, when they paid $200 for it and they get $30 for it at the end of the term. So there are some real benefits, and it lowers, one of the benefits is the platform economy lowers the cost of entry to anybody that wants to enter into a marketplace, because a lot of the upfront capital expense today is accessible online. Sometimes you can lease it, sometimes it's free. But you can lease the pieces that you need to do what you want to do to make happen. So let's talk about the different kinds of platforms there are, which will
So this is real old school.
this is real old school. There's platform providers that are platforms for platforms. Think Google, or not Google, think Android and the Apple iOS system. Those are platforms for smartphones, but they also allow for all kinds of other platforms. Anybody who wants to create an application to use on those platforms can now create an application, a phone app, because that platform, that smartphone platform allows for, and it becomes its own huge ecosystem. So you have platforms for platforms. The internet is, the biggest platform to provide platform for everybody else. Google is just the cataloger of all those things on the internet. But so in order to be at the top, you have for all kinds of other platforms. Okay. Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Performance, those all allow all kinds of other things to be created and occur within that platform. So then there's platforms that make digital tools available. Such as when I left, I retired from the banking industry, we were looking at a provider called Zenefits. It's a platform that would allow a small business to not have to have an insurance agent. It's software that would manage your human resource, all your benefit administration through the software. I wouldn't have to go to an insurance agent or a pension provider. The software gives me access to everything I need. So it would replace an ADP, which was my payroll provider. It would replace Oracle, which was a great big software system that we used at one time to manage all of our employees, and all of the information needed for, their employment history, jobs, and all that stuff. Okay. Zenefits would do that for me. Okay. So again, there's these platforms that provide digital tools for me. There's another one called GitHub, which literally, from a business standpoint, if you go to github.com, you can access all of these things that you need to. It could be how do I do a work schedule? So I go to GitHub and it will provide me all the tools needed to make up work schedules. If I had a 24/7 operation, 7 days a week, like a Walmart, it would allow me to manage and build schedules through GitHub. So there's just a platform that provides you digital tools to access. There's platforms that are mediary. What I call mediatory work, such as LinkedIn. Okay. That's a platform that eliminates headhunters, basically. You can use LinkedIn without having to hire a headhunting firm, because it's going to give you all the people that have the skills that you're looking for that may be entertaining, advancing their careers, or moving within their career. So LinkedIn does the mediatory work of getting their necessary information. Indeed is moving that way. I never heard of Indeed up till 3 years ago. Today, everybody that I know that's looking for a job looks at Indeed. I just went to look at Indeed Alpena. There's 9 pages of job listings. 212 jobs listed on Indeed in Alpena. Now, some of them, based on the information that I put in, because I'm an Indeed user, some of the information listed jobs for me that were interesting. An HR job in upstate New York at a casino, and one on a Disney cruise line as an HR director, which was tempting, Other than the hurricane stuff, I might think about that. So, I mean, those were the only 2 non-Alpena. Centralize and say I want to be within 25 miles of my base, and I took the filter off just to see what all it would provide me. So Indeed is doing the same thing. So there's these platforms that can perform mediatory work. Indeed would do that. Most employers would use LinkedIn and actually post most of their jobs today through Indeed.
Who pays?
You won't see it in the paper.
Who pays? You used to go to an agency to help you get a job. So LinkedIn, who pays for this?
For LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
Not the user.
Not the user?
No, advertisers and people that want to access. If I'm an employer and I want a listing of people, then I'd have to pay just like I pay a headhunter. But I pay the platform, I pay LinkedIn. Indeed, as a user, as a subscriber to Indeed, I post my resume, I look at every job, the job comes up, it costs nothing for the employer to post a job on Indeed. Let's post it.
So how do you spell that, Joe?
INDEED. Sites and just look around. These platform providers are very interesting, and the stuff that's out there is incredibly
today. And that's where, I'm thankful I have kids of that young, smart age, that 20-something ages. That's where I get most of my modern, updated information. And it's moving very fast. Then there's, of course, retail platforms, and you all know this. I would guess that in the last year, personally, 90% of my purchases other than groceries were done through Amazon. You know, I go to Amazon. I'm an Amazon Prime user. I get free quick shipping. I get to look at all kinds of stuff. I get to read all the reviews. I can pick what I want to pick, you know. And all I have to do is just type in something and it'll give me all the stuff. As a frequent user, I bought this, you might want to look at this, you know. Geez, how'd they know that, you know? So the technology, the platform, the information in those algorithms is so clean and so good, it provides that. So the retail platforms, whether it's eBay or Amazon, are getting bigger and bigger. Most retailers today have their own retail platform. Whether it's Walmart, it will deliver your groceries, or you can pick them up. Home Depot will deliver. So the retail platforms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's service providing platforms. Such as Airbnb, Lyft, Kickstarter, Indigo, all these stuff. They're providing you a service. They're connecting buyers and sellers together through their platform, but they're a service provider. And so that's, and then there's some interesting global platforms, primarily to deal with finance. I talked about RateList. You want to get venture capital, you can go online. There's called AngelList. It's a list of venture capitalists that are looking for good ideas to fund going forward. You don't have to go to a bank. You don't have to go to an investment firm. Today you can use a platform online and look. One of the most creative ones I see is it's called TransferGo and TransferWise. And this is allowing the international global transfer of money. So you can do it online, where before it was quite impossible. If you wanted to travel, you had to convert your American currency to some other currency to matter where you're going. Now you can go to TransferGo and TransferWise, and this stuff will be recognized where you're going, because it allows for the transfer of funds across borders. So again, someone saw a need, they built a platform, and provide the services.
Is that like PayPal?
It's the same, very much. Yeah, it is. PayPal's it's same idea. It's a platform that allows you to finance transactions. If you don't want to use your credit card, you don't want to send a check, or you don't want to debit your account, you can use PayPal.
Where's Bitcoin?
I don't know enough about Bitcoin to be. I'll tell you what. No. There's people that made a lot of money on Bitcoin, and I'm not sure it's caught on yet. But Bitcoin is for large commercial online transaction stuff. And all I know is the guys that sued the movie about Facebook, the two twin brothers, they just started a brand new company on Bitcoin. They think that's the future of promoting and getting more usage out of Bitcoin. And I don't know enough about it to be comfortable actually talking about it. But again, it's a platform. Bitcoin is a platform. So.
What about wallet? Is that a platform?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So let's talk about, what does this mean? So we have all these platforms and what we call the platform economy. It certainly has a lot of transaction value today that is occurring via these platforms. How will it actually transform our economy? The negative people say it's now going to be a gig economy. You're not going to be tied to a corporation who, when I went to work, when I started my career, I went to work, corporation took care of me. Provided my retirement money, provided my health care, and provided my income. And I was an employee. And I was loyal to the company because they took care of me. I was loyal to the corporation because that was my wherewithal. Okay? In a platform economy, there's not really very many employees. Okay? Google they made $65 billion last year, and they only have 50,000 employees. Okay. Uber I talked about the market valuation of Uber. They only have 1,500 employees. Okay, so the number of employees that a platform company or platform provider is tremendously diminished from this old industrial revolution. And so the detractors say we're in a gig economy. And JP Morgan Chase in 2018 took all of their financial transactions, their credit card, their account transactions, and did a study to try to figure out what was the effect of all the income from their account holders that came through a platform, a 1099 kind of operation. 4.5%. So the gig people say you're going to create a bunch of part-time employees who are going to make a lot less money than they did in the old-style industrial revolution, where we had companies that wealth a little bit better than our platform economies. So the question is, how is the value created, and then who captures the value? Does all the value go to the platform creator, the few platform creators? In almost all these markets where we have platforms, you have a monopoly type situation where you only have a few dominant firms controlling more than 60% of what it is that they're doing. Lyft and Uber. They control almost 80%, even though there's ride share and you can get zip cars and other things. 80%. That allows them to pretty much capture all the value and not necessarily have to share the value in a more competitive market. And then who owns and controls the platform? Okay. Is it the software engineer who created it, who now has grown it big enough, can take it out on an IPO and still be the major shareholder and gather in all this wealth? Is he sharing it with the non-employee driver that just happens to be, renting out a piece of his asset, his automobile, to meet somebody's need? The big moral question is, what is the conscience of the network? Is it just the software engineer who's building that, or do they put in there their conscience? Is there morality in what they're doing? Okay. How about the public? How do we hold platform users accountable? In the case of Uber, the taxi companies, a guy used to have to pay a lot of money to get a medallion to be a taxi cab driver, and that medallion is worth money.
because there were only so many issued in the city because we didn't want all these taxis all over the place. So how does he compete against a non-regulated Uber? Because it's on the internet and these people make connections. How does the hotel, who has this huge capital investment and has real employees, compete against an Airbnb, who probably is cheaper, doesn't have the same kind of rules that a hotel does, from a check-in, check-out, all this stuff? How do they compete? Most of them have gone to their local government agencies and say, let's ban them. You know, we have to ban them. And so there's this morality issue. You create this platform. What's its role in our current economy, and particularly from a competitive and a standpoint, trying to compete with already established businesses that are providing the same kinds of service? How are the hours of work packaged? And who takes care of the people in a network situation where you have buyers and sellers? Networks don't necessarily, the network provider just necessarily isn't. They're not my employee. They're just doing it for the money that they get to haul somebody here or to use their house. The person that's using the house is getting reimbursed, and yeah, I'm taking a share of it because I made the arrangement if I'm an Airbnb. So how the new wages are going to be determined can be radically different. Back in 1952, Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite writers, wrote a famous novel called Player Piano. If any of you are interested in where the platform economy might go, back in 1952, his book visualized the digital fortune through being created through material abundance. But also the point of the book was it created a huge social division between a highly credentialed and creative employed elite versus the underclass. And so that's kind of the biggest detraction against the platform economy, is that we're creating this division, this class division of the highly elite, well-educated, highly credentialed versus those that aren't. Okay? And there is this division that's occurring because of the platform economy. So that's something to think. So utopia or dystopia, it remains to be seen in the platform economy, but it is our future. It's a huge part of our future, and it can catalyze economic growth because of some of the benefits, low cost of entry to the marketplace. It allows for lots of entrepreneurial activity, which is, what, at least in America, what we're built on. But it could substantially direct all the gains into the hands of the very few. And so that's what we have to be wary of. So we have this revolution, this algorithmic revolution, and cloud computing and the internet are really the basis and the foundations of this platform economy.
I'm aware of the internet and the background of that, but there's an interesting phenomenon that is sort of gig and sort of not gig, and I wonder if you could speak to that. And that is that some of the platforms that are required to make use of the World Wide Web are not owned by anyone particular. They're a network of people who volunteer to keep them going.
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia's one, but the one that really is amazing is there's a way in which servers, the big computers that run the World Wide Web, have to be organized. And Apache is the one that runs 98% of the World Wide Web, and it's just like Wikipedia. It's a bunch of volunteers doing it. So that's a whole different play on a platform that's generated and accrues wealth to a very small elite of people versus this other way of doing it. I mean, IBM ran up against Apache, really, and IBM said, hey, we've just got to give away our whole hardware business. We'll give it away because we're going to go into providing services instead. They did that because Apache and a few of the other ones that set up the mechanism that they were needing to use to make their business run couldn't be bought. No, it was independent.
Right.
So how does that all fit in?
Well, there are, and that's a movement. It's a movement by smart people that see this discrepancy happening. Linux is another good example.
Linux is a great one.
Linux software is available to, and it's maintained and upgraded and everything on a volunteer basis. Because people that are technically smart see that they're highly moral people that don't want to see this discrepancy between the rich and the poor, for lack of a better term, but they're the elite and the non-elite, so to speak. But there are. Wikipedia is a good one. But there's rules. For those that participate, like in Wikipedia, it's maintained by anybody, but there's rules that have to be followed. And those rules maintain the genuineness, the truth of Wikipedia. And it's the same thing with Linux and the same thing with Apache. But it's interesting, you talk about giveaway. Take Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. You know, both hugely successful in the software world. But Bill Gates was successful because he did what? He gave it away. He gave away his software, where Steve Jobs refused to. The Apple operating system was not a giveaway. Where Microsoft, we gave you the system. You bought your PC, it had it on it, and now we generate income from stuff that can be used on our system. Whether it's, WordPerfect or Microsoft Word or whatever. We have these other software programs now that you purchase to make the platform work. That's a dilemma. But there's enough people in this platform economy that want to see it. Like open source is another big one for the college. Open source textbooks. And it is a company, it's an educational based for-profit company that is doing this, because they also believe in education and opening open source textbooks. So, and everything you read today, it says it's where we're going. It's how we choose, and the choices we make on how to apply it is going to be how pervasive it changes things. But yeah, you're spot on. There are applications and networks out there that are, quote, free and maintained free. So.
When you say how we choose, I
Yep.
don't choose. Who chooses?
Well, the government, for one thing. I mean, we are the government. It's not this institution, and there are representatives. It's how we choose to let policy rule and regulate some of this activity. I mean, for years, and I followed when the government, the Justice Department, was trying to sue Apple, and their stance was it's all the code. You can't sue the company, it's the code. It's our code. If you want us to change, then you're going to have to modify our code. So it's not people.
Break it into an iPhone for information.
Yeah. So, but far more
restrictive are the European countries than the United States. And there, you know, every company that's a platform company that basically started in the United States who's drifting outside of the U.S. is having a much, much more difficult time. Whether it's the Ubers, even the Apple's operating system, with governments that don't want them to be the sole providers. Because they understand, you're like a monopoly. You can act like a monopolist. And I haven't ran into too many benevolent monopolies.
Doesn't the EU have some major suits going?
Oh yeah, against, they banned Uber from many countries. Yeah, in their areas. Yep. So that's a little bit on, that's the platform economy. That's what I wanted to just kind of wet the water, wet your toes with, so that to get you thinking. I did promise the last time I was here, and I think some of you were disappointed we didn't get to. I wanted to share what I call the deceptions of, unless we have any other questions about platform economy.
You were mentioning the student textbooks online.
Yep.
Do I safely assume then that the student will also be flooded with advertising? Otherwise, how would the company providing the material make a living if not by?
They sell it to the college.
Say again?
They sell to the college the rights to have our students access the open.
Will that make the college costs go higher?
Not necessarily. It makes your student costs more competitive. So, but it's a huge movement.
Would the same textbook be written differently for different parts of the United
Well,
States?
that's another interesting point, because what they're trying to do is, I don't want to call it gentrify, but to make one textbook so that you don't have a different history 101 being taught in South Carolina versus History 101 in Alpena. That you're accessing the same text material so that, especially on a transfer basis, we know that they had this, when they transfer in History 101, the accreditation knows that it's pretty much countrywide. You're making it more consistent and uniform. So you're kind of taking, I don't know, Florence, you can chime in, kind of taking the individual curriculum change and making it more uniform, so it eliminates some of the individual choices a community college might make, but it does make sense from because we have to go through accreditation every 10 years, and it's a big process. If it would modify that process, that you're using the same material that everybody else is using, then we can look at student results. And are you getting good student results? So.
Wow, that's huge.
Would that hold true for K through 12?
Well, that pretty much does, and by your state. K through 12 sets the standards on what's to be.
And then you step above that,
Yeah.
and K bar the door.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me about this part of the conversation is there's a lot of research about trying to evaluate how well countries' educational systems work. And PISA is the basic one for K through 12. And research that I've done and for others in the field have done show that countries that do not base their education in textbooks at all have better results than countries that rely, when classrooms rely on textbooks, the quality of education goes down. So it's just an interesting kind of mismatch between the move to become more efficient, become more similar, like the core curriculum ideas, which I support, and this notion that the best education done in the classroom doesn't rely only on a textbook. It's bringing a lot of other resources into it, and it's really building on the skills of the individual teacher.
There's a wonderful TED Talk, and I wish I could remember the name of the guy that did it. And they did an experiment. They took a computer, a laptop, and they put it in a third world country, in a village where the kids, didn't have formal education. And they just set it in the middle of the village. And within 8 to 9 months, the kids were writing code. They taught themselves. They taught themselves how to write code. And he said they kept coming back and checking who was using it, what happened, and they figured it out, and then they were writing their own code to do what they wanted to do on it. And it was in a third world country. And just fascinating, and the whole idea was that learning occurs on an individual basis, and it's how you're motivated from your environment. So, any other comments on? I want to spend the last few minutes talking about the deception of green energy. I know. This has got equal marginal cost, and I want to talk about 3 deceptions: the deception of wind power, the deception of solar power, and one other. So for the past 15 years, our government has put tens of billions of dollars into green energy projects. And as a result of that investment, we've not lowered our dependence on oil. We haven't cleaned up the air or water pollution, and we've not put a dent in any of the greenhouse gas emissions. Green energy investing from a government standpoint, to me, is great politics, but it's a lousy environmental and economic policy because this doesn't happen. The marginal benefit we're getting is far less than the extra cost. So just to give you some background, what do we consider green energy? Wind power, generally speaking, wind, solar, the sun's here, let's use it. Tidal and wave, geothermal. I would also throw in there hydroelectric, but the environmentalists say no because the long-range implications is it kills off fish populations, and it's not good environmentally. And then I would put out nuclear. But again, environmentalists say no, we don't consider that a green energy because it yields hazardous spent fuels, and we don't know what to do with them. So there's 2 things about green energy that you always hear. It's sustainable and renewable. But you'll never hear what that means. They use the words, it's sustainable. And they'll use the words, and it's renewable. But you won't get any true definitions of what that means. It's used too generally. So the only thing I know is the amount of fuel that we use and the amount of energy that we use is only dependent on one thing: price. If we really want to lower our energy costs, we'd raise the price of the energy. When gasoline went to $4 a gallon and it looked like it was going even higher, I didn't see all these gas guzzling pickup trucks out there. I saw more Priuses and fuel efficient cars being driven and people driving a lot less. Why? Price. We're consumers. Energy. When fuel oil price, I was living in a little cabin out on the lake, Huron, and I was heating with number 2 fuel oil. And I was buying it for 19 cents a gallon. Not a big deal. In fact, I was the last house on North Point Road on the way to town. And the fuel guy said, when I get a delivery, can I just constantly tap your tank off? I hate taking fuel back in my truck. I said, have at it. And he says, we'll just bill you for what we, so we'll all keep you full. I said, it works for me. 19 cents a gallon. Oil embargo. $2.90 a gallon. It was $100 a day to heat my house with that fuel oil furnace. Uninsulated concrete block cottage. What did I do? I put in a wood stove. I was driving at the time a 4-wheel drive 3/4 ton pickup truck that got about 8 miles per gallon. And I bought a Pontiac, I can't remember the name of it, little tiny Pontiac that got 38 miles per gallon. Price of energy will drive conservation more than anything. So let's talk a little bit about deceptions. Wind power. I say, oh, wind's free. We invest all this money, capture the wind. It can create electricity, and we can use windmill turbines. Okay, so let's talk about the cost of windmill turbines. Significant steel, fiberglass, and concrete. If you've ever been across Canada, right, in Pontiac there, beautiful farm country, you see those, they built them in a year. It's incredible. Huge wind farm. But think about the steel, the fiberglass, and the concrete. Renewable? I doubt it. Sustainable? I doubt it. Okay? But that's what goes into building a huge wind turbine. Plus, the power that's generated off of a large wind turbine creates, you have to create new pylons to deliver that electricity because it's turbine created. Expensive. Renewable? Sustainable? Not really. So direct drive turbines, which are 70% of what's being put in right now, they require the use of a material called neodymium. And it takes 8 tons of this material in a typical wind farm. Now this material, 100% of it is a rare earth material produced only in Inner Mongolia. And to refine it, you have to boil the ore, which creates a toxic acid that's left behind in lethal radioactive debris ponds. But it's Inner Mongolia, we don't worry about that, right? Sustainable, renewable? Not really. My biggest complaint, the visual pollution. I mean, every time I go to Mackinac and I come back and I see that big windmill sitting right there at the Straits of Mackinac. They're huge, they're in the middle of where the wind blows. We finally went out and visited. My brother lives on Maui, and we're out on an ocean cruise on a whale watching thing, and I look at that beautiful hill on the side of Maui's mountain. Windmill, 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 windmill. They wanted to put in that huge offshore wind turbine farm in Martha's Vineyard. Well, that didn't happen. And the biggest disagreement or the argument was visual. We're Martha's Vineyard. We put it there. Intermittency. The wind doesn't blow all the time. Okay? So a wind farm requires a backup power station. So in order to build a 500 megawatt conventional power plant with wind, you also need a 375 watt conventional power plant that starts and stops and starts and stops and starts and stops when the wind isn't blowing, and it creates more pollution than if it were continually running. Denmark relies on 40% of its power from the wind, but it also uses all the hydropower stations of Norway and Sweden to the north, and the coal-powered stations from Germany. Right? Wind turbines use 3 times as many natural materials versus a gas turbine, and the offshore wind farms use 6 times more resources than a typical gas turbine. So in order for wind power, for anybody to invest in wind power, the government has to subsidize it. So for me, it's not sustainable, it's inefficient, and it's an inefficient use of our scarce resources.
We took a road trip last Saturday from Gaylord south to Howell, and there was a county in there that had wind turbines,
Cherry-
literally, that you couldn't see from horizon to horizon, these big things, and they were 4, 5, 6 at a time. It was miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of these great, big, huge, monstrous things.
That's Cherryland Electric.
Is it?
Yeah.
It was the most, it was worse than sin.
So, but the behind it, all the stuff that you don't hear about, wind power does, it seems smart. But from an economic standpoint, it's horribly inefficient. And in order to put those commercial wind turbines in, it has to be subsidized by government. And whose government? You and me, the taxpayer.
But you do understand that the oil and gas industry is equally subsidized.
Oh, yeah.
And so it really is, to some degree, a question of how's the balance between those two. I mean, commercially, what I understand is contracts that are being sold for new electric generation are much cheaper to go for wind than for gas or coal or oil at this point. In the southern states, 2 to 1. It's cheaper for energy companies to build with wind or solar than it is to build for these other industries. Now that doesn't speak to your issues about rare earth and metals and all of that, but again, goes back to the way in which we cost benefit it.
Right.
What things are we including in that? What things are we not including in that?
All the studies I read say because of the abundance and low price of natural gas, the efficiency is much better if you have a natural gas turbine today.
What does that do to the atmosphere?
Natural gas doesn't burn as much. I mean, it does have
That's my
a
question.
carbon, yeah.
So I think that that's also what you have to look at when you look at cost versus benefit,
Right.
is the long-term benefit. And I do understand that gas is cheap. I mean, when you talk about green, I think you look at it in the sense of what is it doing not this year, what is it doing for next year? You're looking at what's this going to look like in 100 years, where we know what oil and gas is going to look like in 100 years.
Do we?
Yes, I believe we do. I think we're seeing evidence of that today.
Yeah.
Comment, don't gas companies and oil companies pay a lot of tax? Do wind companies do? I mean,
Well, the wind companies are they're power
Don't they pay a lot of taxes?
power companies.
Yeah, it does, it also isn't the United States cleaned up their activities more than any other country in the world. We made more progress in the last 20 years cleaning up our, discharge of dirty energies, whether carbons, I guess, than any other country. Is that on the news? Either or not, but that's what they said. The United States has done more in the last 20 years to clean up our for that to happen.
All I know is when I took chemistry back in college, there's a law that talks about combustion is the opposite of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis happens by plants converting sunlight heat into sugars that feed their plant, and it gives off oxygen. It uses carbon dioxide, sunlight, creates oxygen. Combustion uses heat and oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide. And so this carbon dioxide that's up there, the real solution is plant trees. It's all about trees. Trees are the savior of carbon dioxide because they use it through photosynthesis. I mean, I can't remember there's the theory, and it's some doctor, professor. Combustion is the opposite of photosynthesis. And so really the solution, that's why they're so concerned about the Amazon. And, oh wow, we had a forest fire, but what about all the lumbering and timbering that has gone on there? Probably the worst environmental disaster in the history of the United States
was the clear cutting of the state of Michigan back in the late 1800s. Clear cut. The whole state, clear cut. There are no virgin stands of trees. Rare. Hartwick's pines might be the only one. It was clear cut. Environmental disaster of immense proportions. But we are building all the buildings as the country moved west. So plant trees. That's, if you're really concerned, go out and plant trees. Let's talk a little bit about solar power. Because that's an interesting one, because you see a lot of panels going in everywhere. And I will give the fact that the cost of the batteries to maintain the power being converted from sunlight into electrical power is getting better. But again, it's the same thing. The manufacture and installation uses a lot of scarce resources, fiberglass and lithium. And whereas lithium, again, it's another rare earth material. And you need lots of sun and lots of land. Okay, so obviously, it'd be much better to put them all in the desert. And there's intermittency, which the sun doesn't always shine or always creating pure solar energy. So solar panels, again, need backup. And let's talk about two cases. How does solar get financed? NRG Energy, which is in between Los Angeles and San Francisco, they put in 1 million panels. Think about that, 1 million panels. That would equal the power for 100,000 homes, and it cost $1.6 billion. Now, the cost was paid by the taxpayers of California, and customers in Northern California had a 50% surcharge on their bill, so the taxpayers forked over $1.1 billion, even though they weren't getting power from those solar panels. So the surcharge for those non-customers of the power company in Northern California added $500 million to make the $1.6 billion investment. Okay? So big, large things like that, they're not sustainable. They actually destroy wealth. They don't create wealth. It's not renewable because they're using silicon and aluminum and steel and concrete, lithium. Those are non-renewable kinds of resources. And a solar panel uses 3 times more resources than a gas turbine generator, natural gas. And they aren't air pollution free. They are air pollution free. And that's one of the real pluses. Other than that, if you look at all the manufacturing that goes into the solar panels, that's not pollution free. The steel, the concrete. And you're aware of the last presidential election. The Solyndra became a huge deal. The government bailed out Solyndra, the solar panel company, $528 million in grants to the company, and they went bankrupt shortly thereafter because they couldn't make it work, even with more than $500 million of free government money. So, in order for solar panels, for me, to be more cost effective, I don't want the government picking winners and losers. Okay? The government does not have any skin in the game. And you look at what the government, when they pick winners and losers, what their track record is. Whether it's rail systems, Amtrak, or the Postal Department, which constantly can't make money. The government is terrible at picking winners. And I would like to see solar be developed by private sources and not subsidized. Then you'll start seeing innovation, you'll start seeing lower cost to produce solar panels, and the proper placement of solar panels where there's more sunlight more of the time. Because it's interesting where I see solar panels. I mean, I can't even imagine solar panels being viable in northern Michigan. Just can't. We're in Hawaii, there's tons of solar panels because the sun shines all the time. Very low intermittency. And those panels were producing enough to power a house that were located on those houses. So solar, to me, has its best chance of being a truly green energy source. But I don't want government picking the winners and losers. Deception 3, let's talk about electric cars. And I see yesterday that Porsche is released their first electric car to compete with Tesla. I don't understand that idea. I remember with Chevy and GM came out with the Volt. It was priced at $40,000 to $45,000. The government offered a $7,500 credit to anybody that bought one. Sales were so slow that the dealers were offering up to 25% discounts. One of my running friends bought one for $25,000, brand new, out the door. Nice car, it's quiet, can't hear the dang thing. And he shows up and it's like, oh, you know, there's no noise. He plugs it into his outlet at home every night. It's got a 39 range, he drives 6 miles to work and back. He said in the first year, his engine didn't come on once. His his alternative engine. So with the Volt, GM shut the line down 3 times due to low sales and over inventory. And according to the government CBO office, electric cars result in little or no reduction in total gasoline use. And they have the same gas emissions as a gas engine up to the first 80,000 miles traveled in an electric car. It's after 80,000 miles where you get a lower carbon imprint on an electric car. So they create the same amount of carbon imprint, and that comes from the government's budget office. And the sad thing is 40%, because of where most electric cars are, 40% of the electricity is generated by coal-fired electrical plants because it's out east. And most of the power generation, electrical power generation out east is still dependent on coal-powered plants. And we know that coal creates a ton of pollution. Not as much as it used to because they're using lower sulfur coal. But when they were using coal from West Virginia, anthracite coal, high pollution value. Western coal has lower sulfur in it, so it's not quite as polluting, but we know that coal-fired plants are not the way to go. And we're trying to back off of that. Not Trump, but the rest of the country, I think, is trying to move away from coal-fired electrical plants. So that's my case on green energy. There's lots of stuff to consider. When we talk about green energy, I really think the Japanese are way ahead of us and the Chinese because they're developing tidal energy sources that go with the tide, and their turbines that are run with the tide, they have to be at a deeper water depth, and they're offshore. They're not visually obnoxious, and it has tremendous potential to develop, to redevelop that turbine process. I know at Lafarge they generate. When I worked at the cement plant, when I was going through college, those turbines over there that they have, those water turbines, the hydroelectric turbines that they use, we're using some of the wave stuff and lower depths than that, generated a ton of power to run those kilns. So there are some old methodology and old ways that are still less offensive to our environment to create energy. So I think there's two solutions. One, raise the price of energy. I know that's highly not likely, but when you see energy cost price go up, you'll see people start to conserve. And that truly is a way to do it. You can target the big users of energy, make them pay more for that energy loss, and plant trees.
Wave, what you're talking about.
It's called tidal and wave technology.
Are they working on it?
Japanese already have it in place.
No, but is the U.S.
Yes.
working on it?
Yep.
Just a comment, that's great if you live close to the ocean.
Ocean. Yeah.
But, you know, you and I don't. Just another comment is that, you know, if I'm an energy company and I want to build a coal plant, and the reason it's not going to happen, put in so many pollution controls that I can't hire a construction company to build me a plant that they can guarantee when it runs, it will meet the pollution.
Right.
That's what's really happening. So you will not see another coal-fired power plant in the United States being built.
Right.
So you're thinking that's a negative?
Well, it depends. If you have a iPhone and you want to power it someday, and the wind's not blowing and it's cloudy, you're in trouble.
Well, that's true, but I mean, you have to breathe, and you have to drink the water.
Well, I'm just saying that, the bottom line is, yeah, you increase something, people will use it less.
Right.
The price.
What about geothermal?
They haven't. I mean, they've developed it enough so that if you're building a new home construction, geothermal furnace is a very viable alternative versus gas, oil, or wood. One of the big, you see more and more wood chip fired plants because that's a renewable resource. You should be able to chip trees after 20 years. Every 20 years you can, re-chip them and that. But I want trees to be planted, not be used for energy.
We're in Tulsa, up with trees, it's the signs up and down in Tulsa. It's big there,
Yeah.
up with trees.
Well, another thing is, man has this thing is that he wants to live where man was never intended to live, such as the desert.
Right.
California is a classic example. If the earthquake doesn't get you, the fires will. Man builds where man should not build, and then when things go wrong, he goes, gee, what happened?
Yeah.
Build cities below sea level.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're right. Yeah, I think of all the construction that goes on in Florida, and it's just like mind-boggling to me because it's a state that basically sits below sea level, most of it, and yet they still construct. And so,
You know they're going to have lakes too.
To substantiate your point, I was in France. Every house had a little refrigerator. It was 113 degrees there, and there was not one air conditioner in the town. Not one that I found. Gas was close to $8 a gallon. I had a little Prud'homme, and it took 33 liters. It cost me close to $70. And a lot of scooters, electric scooter, old guys, but young people running around on those things, a lot of motorcycles, and a lot of smart cars. And no pickups.
right. Yeah. That's
how they live,
Carrie?
Adding to the cost of coal wasn't included the cost to people's health, which has got to be enormous.
Absolutely. Yep.
So that should be a factor in not building more coal plants.
Right.
I would think.
David?
Who owns the wind farms north of Harrisville, Joe?
It's not Alpena Power, I know
You're
that.
familiar with the,
Yep.
just north of the village there?
Yep. I'm not sure. You can, as you know, electric utility companies are regulated. I used to love it. I used to have Steve Fletcher come in and talk to our class when we were doing this thing on regulated monopolies. And he'd always say, how many of you see Alpena Power advertising in the Alpena News? And they said, occasionally you see an ad, and he goes, you know why we advertise? We're the only provider. Why would we run advertising? Because we're going to the Public Service Board for a rate increase. And we don't want you complaining, you know. So regulated power companies, if you're creating power and you have an abundance, they're required to purchase it from you. I always thought that would be my dream, is every day to send a power company a bill, because they have to take the power that you generate. So that might be someone, that might be a private group that's generating power and selling it. So I do know that Alpena Power's contract with DTE, their main generating source, and Alpena Power doesn't generate, they're a distributor of power. They don't generate power. So they're purchasing most of their power. Their big contract comes up, I think, next year. So they're going to be in the process of negotiating where they get the power from and how it's delivered. So I know when they deregulated the power company, when I worked out at Stoneport, one of the significant advantages we had, we were a big enough user that we actually bought power because we were running crushers and mills, and so we were a big user, and we were getting our power from out west. I mean, they delivered it through all the transmission lines, but we had an excess. And because we were buying it off-peak, we had a huge discounted price. And that off-peak power was, I think, going through Presque Gas and Electric, and then we were selling our excess back to them. So the deregulation of the power industry was a huge success for you and I, a typical user. It worked out really well. But geothermal is certainly one of the future ways. I still think that if we had a safe way to get rid of spent nuclear waste, that nuclear power is the cleanest and probably the most efficient energy source. But again, you have the spent fuel cells. What do you do with them? And they have a 200-year life.
200,000.
200,000, yeah.
In the area we live in, wood-burning stoves everywhere.
Right.
That's a common thing in northern Michigan. Has there been any study as to the effect of that versus having gas? I mean, is there more pollution as to a study to say, by burning up all this wood for stoves or whatever it may be, as to that being a worse situation than buying gas?
It's not as clean as natural gas.
So it would cause more pollution than if you had the gas?
I heard that there was a problem over in the Mayo area.
They've actually had burn alerts here in northern Michigan on the other side of 75 where they're in a pocket, and that's exactly what happened. And they had breathing aversion.
Mayo.
Yeah, so it causes more pollution, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would suspect that burning wood individually in each house is worse than having a coal-fired plant. Because at least with a coal-fired plant, you have some technology to improve the purification.
Yeah.
Because coal is ultimately just an old forest.
Very old.
Right.
Before diamonds.
Before diamonds.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.